Hello, we are going to talk about materials, and I will start with a quote that I really like, that it's from Corbusier, and he says something like, "You employ stone, wood, and concrete, and with these materials you build houses and palaces. That is construction. Ingenuity, it's at work. But suddenly you touch my heart. You do me good. I'm happy, and I say, this is beautiful." That is architecture, and art ends here. Believing in its words, I'm going to talk about some materials and how we can employ it in the design, both for interior or for architecture, and how important it's for the architects to choose materials that are close to their heart to kind of convey their concepts and pass their message to the users of their projects. We are going to explore three different types of materials. The first one, it's the natural materials, and there's a subdivision in stone, wood, straw, bamboo, rammed earth, adobe, and sawdust. Then we have the processed materials like brick, concrete, plaster and stucco, Egyptian board, tile, metal, and glass. And finally, we have the synthetic materials like plastics and all the range of thermoplastics and thermosetting, where we include the epoxy resin and also the fiberglass. No design is possible until the materials with which you design are completely understood. This quote is from Mies van der Rohe, and I think is completely right about it. And you'll see that the way that I organize the lecture, it's actually to talk about the materials related to a specific architect. If you analyze some of the greatest architects, they usually have a material that is close and that it's more explored by them during their professional life. So I'm going to kind of link different materials with different architects and show some of the pictures of their work and try to explain the reason behind the use of such material within their, let's say, design philosophy. I think that most times architects, they play along with different materials, but most of the times they select one that it's more important that they use throughout their process, and then they develop with him. So meaning that they start to know the material and they need some time to understand it and to understand what they can do with that material to then export it in different ways in the design. So that's why I feel that many times architects, they kind of try to consume that material till the end, so they actually can answer all the questions possible that can be done with that specific material. So we'll start with concrete, and with concrete I will introduce architect that it's Oscar Niemeyer. It's a Brazilian architect, and he says that there is no reason to design buildings that are more basic and rectilinear, because with concrete you can cover almost any space. He says this because he is one of the most well-known modern architects that start to explore the concrete, and because the concrete had this kind of aesthetical and structural plasticity that they didn't have before with the low-bearing walls, he wanted to, break the rules and go outside the box and try to do and achieve forms and masses that weren't possible to be achieved before with the normal methods of construction. So you see here some of the pictures in your left side. Most of them are from Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. And another character that it's known as the father of also the modernism architecture, it's Le Corbusier. And he started to be in love with the concrete as much as Niemeyer and everyone from the same generation. And he first started to develop a maison domino that was a structural frame of reinforced concrete. He tried to kind of come up with an affordable prefabricated system that could solve the lack of housing after the World War I. Later on, also, pursuing this quest about the opportunities that concrete was allowing architects to do, he formulated his 5 points of architecture: pilotis, free facades, open floor plan, ribbon windows, and roof gardens. As you can see, this Villa Savoie express all the 5 points together. And then we have here a slide that shows, it's like to compare what the architects were facing before, let's say, the appearance of the concrete in the architecture world. So you'll see that in your left side, you have the new 5 points of architecture, and then in your right side you have the whole houses and construction. So the first one that you see, the little dots, are the pilotis, that are columns to support the buildings. Before, they had low-bearing walls, so they couldn't afford just to have a free plan. Now, these pilotis allowed the free plan, so they could put the walls and do the structure in any way that they wanted. And with the ancient one, they couldn't do this. The same thing with the free facade, because the structure was free from, let's say, the envelope of the outside of the building. They were able to play with the facade. And at the same time, if they could play with the facade, if the columns were no longer attached to the facade, to the low-bearing walls, the horizontal windows could be introduced from, let's say, a corner of the building to the other one, even to go around the building. The other aspect that it was introduced by Corbusier was the roof garden. He thought that because he was stealing the place of the earth when he was putting the building, that same place should be somehow reintroduced in a form of a roof garden on top of the building. There are some pictures here of the work of Corbusier. You can see indoors and outdoors, and the materiality of the shape, different range of masses that are explored. The third architect that also employs concrete in almost of all his works is Tadoando. He really likes the materiality of concrete. Usually it just leaves the concrete completely blank. He has a technique, he developed a technique of, making it smooth and shiny. And he feels that he can create and transfigure spaces just by the use of this material. And this is the material that he uses in almost all his projects. Now, if we go to another material that is stone, we start here with a quote that says, "Every single material has its own shadow. The shadow of stone is not identical as that of the brittle autumn leaf. The shadow penetrates the material and radiates its message." So kind of conveying that each material and each stone will kind of have its own identity, and the message of one will be different from the other. As we know, like in a conceptual approach in architect, we usually say that one concept has its own specific things that cannot be transported to others. Regarding the stones, we already know that we have kind of three groups of stones. So we have the igneous, the sedimentary, and the metamorphic rocks. And in the igneous, one of the most used, it's the granite. Then in the sedimentary rocks, we have the limestone. That is also widely used from the architects. And then, of course, in the metamorphic, we have the marble and slate that it's also employed in lots of architecture projects. Within the stone, we have here an example of the architect Álvaro Siza Vieira. He thinks that he is sensible to the traditional construction techniques. So what you'll notice when we'll talk about brick, when we'll talk about glass, when we talk about stone or marble, is that if you really, maybe you never thought about this, or maybe you never read about that, but what architects they try to do, they try to use the material that it's available in the country that they are working for. So it's normal that in Álvaro Siza Vieira, it's mainly working in Portugal, and stone, it's one of the available rocks. So it's a sustainable way to produce an architecture. More than that, it represents the traditional way of construction. So when you are using, you are kind of mimic your ancestors, and you are using the same kind, sometimes trying to reinterpret that technique into a new ways, new contemporary ways of assembling stone, but kind of giving a linkage between what was in the past and now what is in the future. And other architects that also explore stone, as you can see, there's the use of stone. If you look at the old houses built of stone, they don't look nothing like this. Also, stone and marble employed in floorings and walls and staircases in the interior. So the same thing, like I was explaining, happens to Alvar Aalto with the brick. He says that architecture is not merely national, but clearly has local ties and that it's rooted in the earth. So this just comproves what I tried to explain. Each architect, based on the country that he was working and based on the local availability of materials, they were trying to use the things that are related to their country, also to be, again, sustainable, but in a traditional way to make it closer to people. There is a really nice story. I really like this. You can read then, but I'm going to try to sum it up. So there was a conversation, or he was attending a conference from Frank Lloyd Wright, and Frank Lloyd Wright also likes and employs the brick in most of his projects in America. And one of the things that Frank Lloyd Wright was saying is that he was saying that brick, it's like a common material and it's kind of almost valueless. It's very cheap. It costs like 11 cents at the time. But this is the difference. If you remember the first quote where Corbusier was talking about the construction and then touch your heart and being architecture, this is the same thing. You can buy a brick and you can use it in a normal construction way, or if you give it to an architect, he will be able to transform and give you that the same price weighted in gold. So what he was saying is that even it's not just with luxurious materials that we can reach to a very good architecture. No, it's actually with standard materials that are very low cost, that the way that we assemble and the way that we put them together, it can create a new design that can kind of worth their price, let's say, in gold. So this quote, architecture, it's the transformation of a worthless brick into something worth its weight in gold. You'll see later on, I'll show you some other projects that are using standard, simple, very common materials and transform them and putting them into a different standard in architecture. So here there's a range of different projects and different architects that are using the brick. All of them using the brick because of local conditions of the material. And again, they are trying to do this in a kind of a new format. And you can see this easily here, maybe more clear, that it's not because you have a brick that you cannot even, play with the shape. So you can see in the top left side this curvilinear in kind of a bubble shape that is also achieved by the brick. And the brick can also have a variation that can create rhythm and different patterns in contemporary facades. Now, regarding the glass, one of the main characters, it's actually Mies van der Rohe. He says that we must remember that everything depends on how we use a material, not on the material itself. So this is just to comprove what Frank Lloyd Wright had said before. New materials are not necessarily superior. Each material, it's only what we made of it. And this is what you have to think, okay? Sometimes you try to use the latest materials and technology because you feel that this will make you, more trendy or fancy. That doesn't mean that the project itself will look better. Actually, it will be even better if you can, with a normal, very simple thing that never no one ever thought that it could work like that, and then you give it a twist and you make it work. This is much better in terms of architecture. So some are you know that Mies van der Rohe was known by the minimalistic movement in architecture. He said that less is more. So this use of glass emphasized the skin and bones architecture. By this time, they already had the metallic structure to build skyscrapers, and he used this as an advantage to produce his type, his style of architecture. Another team of architects that like to employ a lot for different reasons, but they use glass in their projects is Sana. Seima, they like to use the glass. They are Japanese architects, and if you know a little bit about Japanese architecture, they usually don't have the boundaries between indoor and outdoor. They quite like to do links and interaction between indoor and outdoor spaces, and there is no really kind of enclosed spaces or boundaries, fixed boundaries. So everything is more flexible and smooth. So the idea of this, they employ the glass in a way that they could make the things transparent and communicate, the spaces will communicate together. Some more pictures here and projects, different projects, and use of glass in different situations, from the floor, staircases, ceiling, box facades. The same thing here, then combined in different structures. And then when we reach to the metal, one of the architects that we cannot just go around him, it's Frank Gehry. So Frank Gehry said that architecture should speak of its time and place, but earn for timelessness. So when you look at his projects, they look more like sculptures and masses and objects that really you cannot relate, at least for now, to a specific time. They feel a little bit more, let's say, advanced than our era, so maybe that's why he feels that they will last longer. Also because they don't kind of mimic something that you can see in nature or in reality. So they feel a little bit more out of our time. We have here some more examples of his work, and where he's employing the rapid forms that are making statements of the city skyline. The same thing here, and how the metal reflects, the surroundings. It could be the sky, but it could also be the buildings that are surrounding the object, the architecture. The other team of architects that really likes to employ the metal is Herzog and Miro. And they are really concerned about the materiality of the spaces and how they can develop different strategies for the materials to create patterns and different approach that are new to the design solutions and architecture that we currently know. So they are looking for new tactile properties and surface, and they are always exploring the textures. You can see here in this slide, and you'll see in the next slides, how using the metal they can achieve so much variety and in shapes and colors and intensity, rhythms and patterns. They look like somehow like fashion designers, exploring the facades of the buildings and the materiality as they were like fabrics and designs and trends in architecture. Like, try to think about the skin and the envelope of the buildings. So here there's like 6 or 7 pictures of different ways that they incorporate metal in their designs. Now, if we go to the wood, we have also like a couple of architects. We'll start with let's say the oldest one. We already talked about Alvarado, and here the code is exactly the same. He was using that I covered in the brick. Wood and brick was something that was a common a topic, an element in his architecture. Again, it's root to what he has there. You have some pictures, and wood, it's a very flexible and versatile material that can be used in different aspects. Now, more recently, we have two architects, Kengo Kuma, a Japanese architect, that it's exploring this the wood, also because he's first of all carried by ideas of sustainable architecture, and then second because he wants to define many times like the structures and things that you think that were not able to be constructed made out of wood. He wants to actually prove that they can be done. So he wants to make objects that usually will be very dense and heavy look like they are soft and not and lighter than they should. You have here some more examples of wood applied in so many different ways: ceiling, walls, floor, for shading devices, in bathrooms, in shops. And then the second one, more contemporary, is the Shirumban. And again, from Japanese architecture, this is again one of the most famous architects today dealing with wood. And again, through the same reason, he says that wood is the most ecological thing. So he talks and he explains that steel and concrete, we are just consuming from a limited amount. Timber is the only renewable material, so it's among the few materials on the market today that it's easily sustainable. So always when he tries to do his design, even if they are using like fiberglass or other new techniques, like you can see here in Centre Pompidou in Metz, is always incorporating wood as a material that could be recycled and could be reused, and it's more sustainable than others. A couple more examples of interior spaces, and here how you can apply something like a pattern, wood pattern in the facade, and the transparency that you get from the interior. Again, interior spaces and outdoor areas, and how a rooftop made out of wood, as in kindergarten, can be used for a play zone for the kids. Regarding wood, there are two important groups that we need to know. So we have the softwood and we have the hardwood. And the softwoods, they come from coniferous trees, which are evergreen trees, and like fir, spruce, yen, pine. Hardwoods are broadleaf trees called deciduous trees because they shed their leaves at the end of each growing season, except in the warmer climate. And some examples are magnolia, oak, teak, beech, birch. So if you understand a little bit about the difference between the evergreen tree and the deciduous tree, it's easy to understand that 80% of all timber will come from softwood, because softwoods, they are more economic than the hardwood because they have a faster rate growth, and also they are softer and they have lower density than the hardwood, so they are easy to work with. The hardwoods, they are more expensive because they also have a slower growth rate. They have a higher density, and they are stronger and more durable. The softwood is usually applied in building components like structural framing, roofing, exterior sliding, paneling, and then the hardwoods are mostly applied in high quality furniture, interior paneling, flooring, and construction that needs to last. So only 10%, 20% of the lumber construction comes from hardwoods. Here it explains a little bit what I was already explaining in the other side, the advantages and disadvantages of each one. Then we have also the engineered wood. And the engineered wood, we have the wood veneer. And veneer refers to thin sheets of wood, usually thinner than 3 millimeters, that are sliced, peeled, or saw for a piece of lumber. And you have a couple of examples here. They could range from furniture to panels and interiors. Then we have the plywood. The plywood consists of 3 or more layers of veneer. So we had the veneer first that we introduced. Now, if you glue several layers of veneer in 90 degrees at a grain at right angles, then you have plywood. And there are some examples of furniture that are made out of plywood. The other types are blockboard and particle board. So the block boards are made using solid rectangular blocks of wood. So if you look at the pictures that you have, it will be the ones on more like your left side. So they are stronger and more durable because they are just slice rectangles of block woods laid side by side and joined end to end. The particle boards, they are different because they are very small chips of wood. So the sawdust that it's the leftovers of the production of wood, that it's brought together using phenolic resins and then compressed and mixed to then flat and boards. So the two pictures on your right side, you'll see the plain particle board in the bottom, and then on the top you'll see that it's a melamine particle board because you see the appearance of the wood in the upper part. Then we also have the MDF and the HDF. So MDF stands for medium density fiberboard, and then HDF for high density fiberboard. This is an engineered wood product made it by break down the hardwood or the softwood residuals into wood fibers, often with a defibrator, and then combining it together with a wax or a resin binder and forming panels by applying high temperature and pressure. So this MDF is generally denser than plywood, and it's also stronger and much denser than a particle board. You'll see that lots of interior design projects are done with MDF panels. Then we have to finish this wood part, we have the laminate. And lamination is a technique of manufacturing material in multiple layers. So the composite material achieves improved strength, stability, and sound insulation and appearance. The laminate is usually permanently assembled by heat, pressure, and welding or adhesives. What happens is that normally the laminate, what it has, it's like a photographic layer under a clear protective layer, and then it can resemble to any material that you want. It's like, it could be rock, it could be slate, it could be marble, it could be resembled to wood. So it's not a real material, it's a fake material that it's reproduced on the laminate. Then to finish, we have our dear architect Zaha Hadid, and there's a quote that I think it's the most quote from Zaha Hadid, well-known quote. There's 360 degrees, so why stick to one? I think this is actually a statement of her architecture. So all her professional life, all her quests, she was actually trying to prove or trying to define this. If we actually have 360, why we are just working, we know, with right angles or just inclined shapes? So she went beyond that. But for that, she had to use very or more technology and also new materials that were developed, like the composite fibers. So here you'll see in this project how the fluidity of shapes it's created. So it's unified project made of complex geometries that are created through parametric design. And here she used glass fiber reinforced polyester to create an almost seamless flowing exterior that you can also see that also creates a seamless endless interior in these pictures from the interior part. Every day we are having new materials up to test, and we have architects every day that are working with companies and industries to develop new projects and work on prototypes, so then they can create designs that are based in patterns and materials and in textures that didn't exist before, that were created and specific just for one project or one specific concept. To finish, I would just like to pinpoint four important material criteria that you have to have in consideration when you are doing your design, your project. So first we have the functional criteria. The suitability to the basic function of the material, the durability of that material, if it's easy to maintain, if it resists to damage, also if the safety characteristics and the acoustical performance of a specific material. Then you have the aesthetical criteria. What is the range of colors that you have? What are the possibilities of pattern? And is this suitable visually for the intended function that you want to achieve? Then we have the environmental criteria. It's consider products that are made from recycled materials or that are easy to recycle. So as I explained through the slides, there are materials that could be easily recycled and others that are not like as easy. So you should think about this. And then lastly, we have the economic criteria. So as architects, it's our duty not to think about just the first cost of the material, but actually to think about the lifetime cost. So how much it will cost, how much that material will last, and then how much it will cost to maintain, to clean, repair, and when will it need to be replaced in the future. So if you are able to give the answer to those four questions, then for sure you'll be able to find the best materials suitable for your design project. Thank you.